Level 1. Army Ranger. You're 20. Fort Benning, 0430. Someone throws a garbage can down the hallway and the sound hits before you're awake. Ranger Indoctrination Program starts today. 67 candidates. You know going in that roughly half won't finish. You don't know which half yet. Neither does anyone else. That's the point. You run, you ruck, you swim in water that's 54 degrees, and climb ropes with wet hands and do push-ups in the mud until the number stops meaning anything. The instructors don't yell. Not the way Basic yelled. Basic yelling was theater. This is just the standard, applied without comment. You meet it or you don't. Your bunk neighbor is a guy named Vasquez. Puerto Rican from the Bronx has a photograph of his daughter taped to the inside of his locker door. She's maybe 2 years old in the photograph. He looks at it every morning before formation and then closes the locker and doesn't look at it again until the next morning. You notice this in week 1 and you never mention it and he never mentions it, and somehow that understanding between you is the beginning of something. Ranger School is 61 days. Florida phase, mountain phase, the swamp. You lose feeling in your feet for 9 days straight in the mountains and learn that losing feeling doesn't mean you stop. You sleep 3.5 hours a night on average across the full course. Your body weight drops 24 pounds. You function anyway. Graduation, a tab on your shoulder, black and gold, 2 inches long. You get your first assignment, 75th Ranger Regiment, 1st Battalion, Hunter Army Airfield, Savannah, Georgia. You're going to spend the next 3 years becoming the thing that the tab says you are. You don't know yet that someone is watching. They're always watching. That's the part they don't tell you. Level 2. Ranger. Combat deployments. You're 22. 3 deployments in 3 years. Afghanistan twice, Iraq once. The work is direct action, hitting targets at night, fast, precise, gone before anything can respond. You go in by helicopter or on foot or both. You clear buildings in the dark with equipment that costs more than most people's houses. You come back before dawn and debrief and sleep and brief again for the next one. Deployment 1, Afghanistan. 14 direct action missions. You're the youngest man on the element for the first 6. You do exactly what you're told and nothing else. Your team leader, a staff sergeant named Oduya, 3rd deployment from Houston, watches everything without appearing to watch. After mission 7, he tells you one thing. You're thinking 2 steps behind. Start thinking 3 steps ahead. The room you're about to enter is always different from the room you briefed. Know that before you get there. You spend the next 2 months thinking 3 steps ahead. Deployment 2, Iraq. A mission that goes wrong in the way that missions going wrong always look obvious afterward and never beforehand. An intelligence gap. The target had moved the building's interior walls 3 weeks before you arrive. The layout is different. The element adapts. Everyone comes home. In the after-action, you trace the intelligence gap to a source whose access had degraded and whose reports hadn't reflected that. The lesson enters the targeting cycle. The source gets retasked. You are 23 years old, and you have been in more rooms than you can explain to anyone who hasn't been in them. You have not fired your weapon at a person. That changes in Iraq, month 4, a compound in Anbar province, 02:17 local time. You do what you're trained to do. The situation resolves in 11 seconds. You write a 4-line use of force report. Someone files it. A man in civilian clothes watches your unit's debrief. He says nothing. He's there the next morning for a second debrief. He asks 3 questions, all of them about decision-making under incomplete information. His name, he says, is Farrell. 6 weeks later, you receive a letter at your home address. The return address is a P.O. box in Virginia. The letter asks if you're interested in a conversation. You call the number, level 3, paramilitary operations officer, assessment. You're 24. The career training program for the Special Activities Center is not called that. It's not called anything you can repeat. Assessment is 10 days. You don't know where you are. You flew commercial to one city, drove to another, were picked up and driven again. The facility is unmarked. The other candidates, there are 11. Don't use real names. You are evaluated on everything: physical performance, problem solving under sleep deprivation, decision-making when the correct answer isn't available. Language aptitude, psychological stability, how you behave when you think no one is watching, which is a test because someone is always watching. Day 6. A scenario. A role player presents you with a situation where completing the assigned objective requires you to do something that violates the rules you were given at the start. You have to decide in real time whether to complete the objective or follow the rules. There's no right answer. They're watching how you decide and whether you can explain it. Day 8. An interrogation resistance exercise. You won't describe this to anyone, ever. What you will say is that you understand afterward, completely and physically, what it means to hold something, what it costs, how long you can do it. You pass assessment. The training officer, a woman named Delacroix, who you later learn has been running this program for 11 years, shakes your hand on day 10 and says, "Welcome to the program." You ask what the program is called. She says, "It doesn't have a name you'll use out loud." You understand. You always understood. That's part of why you're here. Level 4. Paramilitary Operations Officer. First assignment. You're 25. You won't say the country. It's in a region of the world where the United States has interests that are not publicly acknowledged and operations that are not publicly conducted. Your cover is private security contractor, which is partially true. You work out of a facility that looks like a logistics company. You are one of 4 officers assigned to this station. Your mission is to advise, assist, and occasionally direct a partner force, a local militia aligned with U.S. interests, in operations against a network that is moving weapons through the region. The partner force has 140 fighters. They are brave, undertrained, and operating under rules of engagement that are different from yours, and sometimes incompatible with yours. Your job is to maximize what they can do while managing the gap. Your senior officer is a man named Hartwell, 50s, Boston accent, has been in the program for 22 years. He operates like water, finds the path of least resistance, never forces anything, achieves objectives through patience and positioning rather than pressure. You watch him work and try to understand the architecture of it. A partner force operation, a weapons cache site, intelligence 80% solid. Hartwell makes the call to go. The force moves at night, reaches the site, finds the cache partially stripped. Someone tipped the network. The operation recovers 40% of the expected material. In the debrief, Hartwell says, "Someone talked. We don't know who. We're going to find out by watching what we share and with whom and seeing what moves." He pauses. This is how you find leaks. You make them expensive to hide. 6 weeks later, you know who talked. You don't do anything with that knowledge directly. Hartwell does. You don't ask what he did. That's one of the first rules of this work. You know what you need to know to do your job. Everything else is a distraction. Level 5. Paramilitary Operations Officer. Ground Branch. You're 28. Before we go any further, drop a comment below. What career do you want to see next? Hit like, subscribe. We upload every single day. Ground Branch is where the direct action lives. You are now part of the component that does the things that get described in classified annexes and nowhere else. You have been in the program 4 years. You have operated in 6 countries. You speak 2 languages at operational proficiency and a 3rd at survival level. You can navigate by dead reckoning across 40 kilometers of terrain without GPS. You can perform advanced trauma care in a non-permissive environment. You can drive anything, fly some things, sail others. None of this is the job. The job is making decisions with incomplete information in environments that don't want you there and being right enough of the time that the mission continues. A target in a country at war with itself. A network node. A financier who moves money from outside actors into operational cells. Not a fighter, not a commander. An accountant for violence. The intelligence on him is solid. Location, pattern of life, access points. The operation is yours to plan. You plan it. You brief it. A senior officer named Mwangi, Kenyan-born, has been doing this since before you were a ranger. Reviews your plan and asks 2 questions. What happens if the pattern of life data is 48 hours stale? And what's your exfil if the primary route is compromised in the first 10 minutes? You don't have a complete answer to the second question. You rebuild the exfil plan. It takes 4 days. Mwangi reviews it and says nothing, which means it's sufficient. The operation executes. The financier is detained. The intelligence package recovered from his location is, per the analysts who process it, one of the most significant in the region in 2 years. You never know what they do with it. That's not your information. Your information was the room and the man in it and the 12 minutes it took. You fly home. You sleep for 16 hours. You brief the next target. Level 6. Team leader. You're 32. 8 people. Your team. You've run 34 operations in 4 years. You've planned 12 of them. You've had 3 go wrong in recoverable ways, 1 go wrong in a way that was not fully recoverable, and 1 go so right it was written up as a program case study that you'll never be allowed to read. The one that wasn't fully recoverable, an exfil compromise in a denied area. The intelligence that should have indicated compromise arrived 6 hours after you were already in. 2 operators were separated from the element. Both were recovered. The recovery took 19 hours. Nobody died. Something close to nobody died, which is not the same thing, and you know it. You reviewed that operation 40 times in the following 3 months. You built a decision tree of every moment where different choices were available. You found 7. 3 of them you made correctly, given the information you had. 4 of them you made correctly given the information you had, but incorrectly given the information you could have had if you'd asked different questions in the brief. You changed the brief template. Every team you lead briefs the 7 questions now. You don't explain why there are 7. They don't need to know. They need to ask them. Vasquez is on your team. He's been in the program 6 years. His daughter, in the photograph from the Ranger locker, is 8 years old now. He still looks at a photograph every morning. Different photograph, same ritual. You still never mention it. A denied area operation. A target who has been on a list for 4 years, who has moved continuously, who operates in environments that make access nearly impossible. You spend 11 weeks building the access. You run 5 pre-operational movements to test the approach and the exfil. On the operation, the target is where he's supposed to be. This almost never happens. Level 7. Deputy Branch Chief. Ground Branch. You're 37. You're managing operations now, not running them. That transition took adjustment. The part of this work that makes sense, physically, cognitively, is the execution. You're in the environment. You're reading it. You're making calls in real time. Managing operations from the station is different. You're reading reports of environments and making calls based on summaries of information that was processed before it reached you. You trust your team leaders the way Hartwell trusted you, by setting the standard and watching what they do with it. A team takes casualties on a target, not fatalities. 1 serious injury, a GSW to the leg that requires emergency surgery and a medical evacuation from a country where your presence is not officially acknowledged. The injury is survivable. The medevac runs successfully. The operator, a woman named Torres, 4 years in, one of the best you've trained, spends 6 weeks in a military hospital in Germany before she's cleared to travel. The operation itself was correct. The targeting was sound. The planning was sound. The execution was sound. The injury was the result of a threat element that wasn't in the intelligence picture. Not because the intelligence failed, but because the element wasn't there to be found. You visit Torres in Germany on week 3. You sit with her for 2 hours. You don't talk about the operation. You talk about other things. Before you leave, she says, "I want to come back." You say, "I know." She comes back. 8 months later, she's running her own element. Level 8. Branch Chief. Ground Branch. You're 42. The operational program is yours. 31 officers, 11 active operations, a budget line that exists in documents that almost nobody reads. You don't operate, you govern. That word, govern, took you years to accept. You came to this work through a door marked violence and precision and controlled force, and somewhere along the way, the job became oversight and accountability and resource allocation. You understand why that's necessary. Understanding doesn't make it easier. A congressional notification requirement. An operation that falls into a category that mandates informing the oversight committees. Not asking permission, informing. The notification goes through the director's office. A staffer for one of the committees calls your liaison and asks 3 questions about the operation that suggest they understand less about operational security than they should. You handle this through proper channels. You answer the questions you're required to answer. You don't answer the questions you're not required to answer. This requires a kind of precision that's different from the precision of a targeting brief, but takes the same thing underneath, knowing exactly what the situation requires and not doing more or less. Mwangi retired the previous year. You had dinner with him in Virginia, a restaurant near Langley where the people who work at Langley go because nobody else knows about it. He ate slowly and talked about his garden and asked you nothing about work. When you left, he shook your hand and said, "Don't let the building make you into something the work doesn't require." You think about that regularly. Level 9. Special Activities Division. Deputy Director. You're 48. You sit in rooms at Langley where the decisions are made. Not the operational decisions, those belong to the people in the field. The decisions here are about what the program is, what it does, what it's allowed to do, what it costs in every sense of cost. You brief the director. You brief the National Security Council. You sit in meetings where the word acknowledge means something specific and legally significant. 24 years, 14 countries with varying degrees of official acknowledgement. Operations that worked and operations that didn't, and operations whose outcomes you still don't fully know because the downstream is classified at a level above what you're cleared for now, which still strikes you as strange. A policy review, a practice that has been in use for 11 years, that has produced significant intelligence, that has also produced consequences that are documented in reports that will be classified for the next 40 years. You're asked to assess whether the practice should continue, be modified, or be discontinued. You spend 3 months on the assessment. You read everything. You talk to the people who ran it and the people who were affected by it in the ways that those conversations are possible. You write a report that is 140 pages and says something that satisfies no one completely, which means it's probably right. The director reads it. She calls you in. She asks 2 questions. You answer both. She says, "I'll take it from here." You go back to your office. You look out the window, the parking lot, the tree line, the sky above it. Delacroix is still here. She runs a different program now. Assessment still. Always assessment. You pass her in the hallway some mornings. She nods. You nod. You've never talked about what she saw in you that day at the end of assessment. What made her say welcome to the program? You won't ask. She won't tell. That's fine. It was 24 years ago. You've earned the answer by becoming it. Level 10. Retired. You're 54. The paperwork cleared on a Wednesday. The final debrief ran 3 days. Not hostile, just thorough. Everything you know, cataloged, assessed, compartmented. What you can say, what you can't, what you can never say to anyone for the rest of your life, regardless of what happens. You signed where they told you to sign. The exit was through a door in a building on a campus whose address you won't write down. Someone shook your hand. You drove home alone. It's a Tuesday now. You live in a house in Northern Virginia, 20 minutes from the campus where you spent the last 9 years. Close enough that the distance is a choice, not a necessity. You could be further. You chose not to be. You consult sometimes. Cleared work, private sector. Nothing that matters the way the work mattered. It keeps the mind moving. That's what you tell yourself. That's mostly true. You think about Oduya, who said, start thinking 3 steps ahead. You think about how that instruction expanded over 29 years, from thinking ahead in a room, to thinking ahead in an operation, to thinking ahead in a program, to sitting in rooms where what's ahead is measured in decades, and you're still trying to think past the edge of it. You think about Vasquez. He retired 2 years before you. His daughter is 19 now. He sends you a photograph every year, her, growing, becoming someone. You don't see him often. When you do, you don't talk about work. There's nothing to say about work that the other person doesn't already know. You think about Torres, who said she wanted to come back and came back. You think about where she is now. You know, generally. You don't know specifically. That's correct. You think about the financier in the room, the accountant for violence, the 12 minutes, the intelligence package. You think about what was done with it, which you know partially and incompletely, and about whether the partial and incomplete knowledge is enough to have decided correctly. You believe it is. You are not certain. You've made your peace with the gap between those two things. You think about the operation that wasn't fully recoverable, the 19 hours. You think about it the way you think about certain things, not with guilt, not with pride, with a precise memory that doesn't diminish and doesn't soften and is simply there, in the way that true things are simply there. Farrell died in 2021. An internal notice, 1 paragraph. You read it, you sat with it. Then you went back to whatever you were doing. He wrote something down when he watched your debrief in Iraq. You never found out what. You'll never find out now. You've decided that whatever he wrote was probably right, not because you trust his judgment over your own, but because you've spent 29 years trying to deserve whatever he saw, and the trying was the point. The morning is quiet. Northern Virginia. Quiet. Not natural, not peaceful, just the silence of a suburb that hasn't started yet. You could drive to the campus in 20 minutes. You don't need to. You don't work there anymore. You make coffee. You look out the window. The work is still happening. Somewhere, right now, someone is in a room in a country whose name you know and whose presence the United States does not acknowledge. They are making a decision with incomplete information in an environment that doesn't want them there. They are trying to be right enough of the time that the mission continues. You were that person. For a long time, you were exactly that person. The coffee is hot. You let it cool. You have nowhere to be. You were never there. That was always the deal.